I'm doing something on purpose. I didn't look at any shop manual at all yet. So I try to pull that straight off, and there go the lifters because I'm an idiot and forgot to tip it. For all you young people out there asking me, is a 944 a good first car? Honestly, you guys, second car. Let's work on this thing. Come on in. All right, you guys. So today, as you know, the cam housing here is leaking a little bit at the thin gasket. This is a new cam housing gasket. Now I'm holding it like this because you got to be careful with them. If they get a tiny crack, they're ruined. It's a thin, relatively hard gasket that go on two very nicely machined surfaces because this is in between two pieces of aluminum that hold the cam and the lifters and then the valves. So it has to be precise and it has to work really well. We're going to take that apart today and get on it. But to do that, we do have to remove the timing belts and such. So we have to do that properly. Now, so you all can see it, and to make this easier to work on, I'm going to remove the airbox. I'm also going to remove the barn door mass air sensor, the old Bosch type thing. Get this stuff out of the way so you can see it. And get at it. Also, if you recall, the air conditioning compressor is a little wonky. It's a little loose, so we got to figure out what's going on that. We'll be able to see it better, and we're going to remove this. Now, today, so we don't screw up this engine, one, if you'll notice, the battery is completely removed. And the key is nowhere near the car, so it's not going to engage the starter when the timing belts are out and potentially screw it up. Also, the car is on jack stands, so somebody sticks it in gear and bumps the car, you're not going to screw up the timing or screw up the valves. So I just want to say that because even though this car isn't worth a whole lot of money, it would be a nightmare if we screw it up. So that is a lesson to say that just because the car is, I bought this for $3,000 and it's not a $30 million vintage Ferrari, doesn't mean it doesn't take the same amount of manpower to fix it if you screw it up. So don't screw it up, right? So first of all, this is a stamped steel bracket that went right here. It was simply 10 millimeter hardware, 2 bolts, and 3 nuts right here. So I moved this, I left my hardware with the piece, and I'm nicely setting it on this table. I want you all to realize that there's a method to this madness of putting things on the table. I keep products over here, you know, things like brake fluid and rags or whatever, and then you start moving over. I like to keep big parts that aren't going to get used often out of the way, but nicely organized. And for things where you're not going to keep the hardware exactly in the part, you want to have little sectors and quadrants next to the parts so that logically any worthwhile mechanic could come in here, look and say, here's where it's apart, these are the parts laid out, and you can figure out where everything goes, okay? So we're about to take this out, I'm going to show you. So I removed this bracket here, which holds the airbox on. There is another bracket on the back. It's going to be hard to see here. Now, what I can do is I can disconnect this metal bracket from the car's chassis here, and also there was some sort of hose and thing that I unscrewed here, so that when I take this out, I want it to bring the bracket but leave the hoses. Now, it's also going to be removing the airflow sensor here. I've disconnected that. I've disconnected the hose to this, so I think this is going to come out now, but it'll probably show me up. So let's see how I do, if I'm right or not. Will this sneak by? Yes, it will. All right, here we go. Not bad at all. Okay, so that was reasonably easy. Okay, now this is going to be important. You want to put things like this in a clean area because if something falls down in here that you're not aware of, even if it was small, like you put it on the floor and you kicked a nut or something in here, that nut goes in the engine, yeah, you just blew your motor. Okay, so keep these things clean and intelligently laid out. I'm going to set it here. I think that's nice. And I even cleaned off this table. I didn't even want debris in there on the table that could get into stuff. So let's have a look and see what we got going on here just initially. First of all, this looks like a new alternator, so that's nice. And it looks like the wiring and stuff going to it has been done well and is not burning up. So that makes me feel reasonably happy about everything. And everything I'm seeing, with the exception of like some whirligigs from a maple tree, is pretty reasonable. Okay, now let me get a flashlight. You keep looking there. Let's take a look at the air conditioning compressor because I think I see why. Okay, so the air conditioning compressor is down here, you guys. And you can see one of the air conditioning lines right here. You see how this is, remember how I told you it's totally loose? Let's see if you can see that. See that thing wobbling up and down? It's literally missing a bolt right here to couple into the air conditioning compressor there. That's why it's flopping around. That's a good thing we found it. So you can see that come up, back out. So now it's very important that we caught this. It was easy to tell because the belt was squealing and I went to check the tension. It was very loose, and then I touched the air conditioning compressor and it was loose, okay? So that was easy to find. But if it wasn't squealing and I didn't find that, it's misaligned. And every time you hit a bump, it's going to jostle. And what would potentially happen is you would break off one of those ears that mount it either from the motor or the compressor. And then you're not going to have a nice day. It's going to be a lot of work. So we'll find a bolt, put that in, and that's going to be no problem. Obviously, I'm going to want to have some sort of lock washer on it so that bolt doesn't come out again. But you can see a lot more here going on. This is your flexible intake here, and you do not want a vacuum leak because the airflow sensor is here, the engine's here. So if you have a vacuum leak, you're not going to get a proper reading because it's going to suck air from somewhere else. Now, I want to take this off so you guys can see more. So I have to be nice and be nice to this little clamp here because it's old, and disconnect this other tube that goes to it. This has quite a number of tubes going to it. I've loosened this, and I also disconnected another tube that comes back here. So I'm going to, let's see, I might have to loosen this even more. Sometimes fittings like this have a sort of a barb ring around the item they go over. And the reason being is when you tighten your hose clamp, it really can't slide off the mechanical locking ring. And that's the purpose of those. For instance, on like a radiator hose. But on some things, you don't need it because instead of it having pressure in it that'll try to blow it off, it might be under suction, which could be in the scenario of like a brake cooling duct or something like that. Or even in something like this. And this one's kind of being a jerk. And the reason it's being a jerk, it has a big ring here that goes in here to seal it tightly. See that ring? So that's good. But we'll take a look at this, kind of just a visual inspection. It looks like it's in good shape. You don't see cracks like around the edge of here. It's not broken down where it's smushing. I mean, it's older, but I don't see anything initially here that leads me to believe that I can't just simply reuse this and this is going to be great. Smush the hose clamp a little bit, but it's rather pliable. So I'm going to take this off nicely. I'm going to set it here by everything else, kind of in a way where things are not likely to go in it. Now, the first thing I want to do is, before we even look at this, you want to keep everybody the heck away from your intake, because that's neat to look at your intake and your throttle body here with the butterfly. You can take a look in here if you guys have never seen it. Come on over here. Here's your butterfly. This is your throttle. This is the entire throttle. This is what your right foot is connected to. That's it. That's all the magic, okay? And that's why this circular cam here, which is a 1-to-1 ratio rather than the big one that's stock, is nice because it gives you a little peppier throttle response. Just a little nicer to drive. So, looking at this, everything in here is pretty nice. It's got some dust and dirt and a little bit of surface corrosion and whatnot. And this is sort of funny. I think the previous mechanics had a hankering for Kit Kats. We'll come back to that. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape this over so nothing can get in it. The same thing for these intake tubes, because even if you tape this over and nothing gets into your engine that way, if something fell down in this intake tube you weren't aware of, that can easily just get sucked right into it. So that's the first most important thing. And right here, since we have this top cam belt covers off, you can see this belt here is the timing belt for the balance shafts, one of the balance shafts being at the top, one of them being at the bottom. And then this one is the timing belt, of course, for the motor and a single camshaft, which is here, which we'll come back to. Also, and I'll do this right now, we just drained the coolant out of it, and my camera guy, who is the hero of Sivine, for his family name, just helped me out, taking that, draining that out. So now that the coolant is drained, I can go ahead and disconnect this hose to get it out of the way so we can better work on what we're doing. Now, if you're nice to it, you can probably just hold it out of the way, which I might do, or take the whole thing off. I think I might just go ahead and take this whole thing off because I want you guys to be able to see this journey really well. So I got another hose clamp. Now, obviously, there's going to be somebody out there that's like, Casey, why don't you use a socket? It's so much better than a flathead. Well, a flathead, if you got the right size, is going to work on like all of these, and it's quick and easy, and then I don't have to spend a bunch of time going back to a toolbox and finding a socket. And I agree. A socket on a flex head is really nice for hose clamps. But there's a lot of different sizes of hose clamps, heads, and it drives me insane having to look for tools. So if I can just get the job done with a screwdriver without screwing it up, I'm going to do that, because any person who spent lots of time working on cars knows how much time gets lost to looking for tools that are either lost or, you know, somebody's trying to tell you should use something different. You should use whatever works properly. All right. So let's see if I can get this off like an intelligent human being while I'm yapping on the internet. Okay, here we go. Okay, oops, spilled a little. That's to be expected. Out you go. Anything in there? Nope. Okay, so now this is kind of gross, so I'm going to set it below because I don't want it to get any coolant or stuff up at the top of my nice work surface. Also, I've got the hose clamp here and the hose clamp here. I'm going to take those, and it's pretty easy to tell which one was which. The smaller one obviously goes to the top, the bigger one at the bottom where they fit. But I'm going to leave these hose clamps nicely stacked with the part, so it's easy to tell where they came from. And again, if you look in here, you can see everything really well. This is something that's also kind of totally weird, honestly. Where the heck does this go? Does that go up there? That is such a weird thing. Okay, so this tube here, I think is weird. It actually goes on to the housing that goes over the cam belts, okay? And it goes, in fact, to the top of the airbox. It goes upstream of the air filter. So the engine is sucking, right? And the air is rushing through from here for your cold air intake up in the fender to the box, and it goes in. But some of the air for the engine is being drawn through this and create a suction effect, presumably to keep this stuff clean so it just doesn't build up a bunch of dust or something. So I guess it's kind of like an engine-powered vacuum for the cam belts, I'm assuming, which is kind of neat, actually. And probably important if the Germans put it there. The airbox, I want to throw this out there too. If you come on over here and look, everybody likes to put a cold air filter on these sorts of things because it sounds cool and you feel cool because you did something and it looks neat and blah, blah, blah. But honestly, you probably, in this circumstance, you're not going to add any more power. You're just not. It's not worth it unless you want the noise. I like the noise. I think that's kind of fun. But keep in mind that this is already getting cool air from up in the fender out of the way. And if you really want it to be cool air, you'd have to section off the whole thing to have that filter just for it to make more noise. And does it really matter that much to put that on? I say no. I just like to use the stock one. It's going to filter fine. And even if it makes 4 more horsepower, really, is that going to change your life? So if you're going to do a cold air intake, do it because it's fun and you like the noise, not because you think it's going to make more power, because it's probably not. And this, I don't have to buy this. It was already on the car and works just fine. God, I sound like a dad. Ugh. Anyway, so here we are, and it is time to do more work. Next scene. Okay, people, so we removed a bunch of other things, and I want to show you, the first thing I did was go ahead and use duct tape to nicely cover the throttle body as well as any ports you desperately don't want anything to get in. I didn't cover the radiator one because it's not that big a concern. It's also sideways. I could. It's also gross and wet, and it would be hard stuff to connect. So I'm just letting that one ride. Anyway, we remove the next part of the covering here that holds the timing belts. You can see this is where that hose connected to sort of vacuum the crap out. So that's off, so you can see everything going on here. For everybody that knows a little bit about 944s and the dreaded water pump, this is the dreaded water pump, all these parts. This pulley right here, which is driven by the engine cam belt, which is right here, that pumps your water. So this is part of the water pump housing, and there's a thermostat in there, I guess, and then this is it too. So we're actually going to replace this water pump, not because I think this car needs it, but because I want to show you how to do it. So I actually ordered the belts and the pulleys and the water pump kit and everything, and we're going to all do that together because I really want to show you guys how to do that. Now, I have to remove the cam housing. To do that, I've already removed the 2 bolts that help hold on the fuel rail, and we're also going to replace the fuel injector O-rings because I can see this fuel injector looks like it's starting to get old varnished fuel on it and leaking, and that's obviously a bad thing. So this part snaps open. Looks like there's some snaps here. You can probably need a pocket knife. Okay, let's see. Does that snap out of the way? It's doing something. Oh, it goes this way? Oh, that's weird. Okay, so there, that swings out of the way. This one was already not connected, and so is that one already not connected. So this comes off, and there's your fuel rail. Here's the wire to fire the fuel injectors. You can see the fuel rail here. This is obviously capped off at the end. And then here are 2 relating to fuel pressure regulators and where fuel is fed into it. So this appears to be your fuel supply and your return right here. I am guessing that this one is the supply because it appears to be a higher pressure fitting, and this is the return because it's just hose clamped on. So when I go to remove this fuel injector rail here, so 2 10mm bolts here, and then there'll be 2 10mm bolts here, which I'll remove next. But when I go to remove this, I want to make sure that everything is disconnected out of the way. So I'm going to have to disconnect each one of these and nicely, fuel injector electrical connections. Be careful not to break them. They're old plastic. They got clips, so do it nicely. Now, they're nicely laid out that this obviously comes in from the back and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Like they're all in a row. So you don't really have to mark it. But before you take things off, make sure you know, do you have to mark this or not, so you don't get them out of their order. So what I'll do is I'll swing that over the way, and we'll take this off next and get to the cam housing. So let's go. All right, you guys, so I want to show you this. So here's all the timing belts, and I'm doing something on purpose. I didn't look at any shop manual at all yet. Now, trolls, listen to me. Just stop. Watch the rest of this to understand why. I'm going to find the marks because I haven't done a timing belt on 944 in years, and I don't really remember where they are. So I'm doing this as an intelligent person that knows nothing. For a reason, because I want you guys to become good mechanics. So you can look at things, observe, and know if you're doing something right or wrong just by observation, that you're not married to a book. So what I've done, I got a socket here that fits the crank so I can turn it over, and yeah, the spark plugs are in it, and it's gonna be a little trickier, but I'm not like turning over like crazy. Obviously the battery is disconnected and everything should be right. My camera guy gave me this socket. Let's see if it's the right size. It's not going on, dude. Oh, here it is. My camera guy's good. So anyway, I'm gonna turn this over, and I can see right here, there is a timing mark on this camshaft, okay? There's some paint, so somebody put some paint on here, but that is a notch. That's done by the factory, not some goober mechanic. There's also a notch here. So I'm gonna turn this over here, and then see if there's other things that line up. And that'll be intelligent. The other thing is the direction of travel. I don't want to turn this engine over backwards. So how do I know I'm turning it the correct way? Because the timing belt does not have an idler pulley, like changing its direction of rotation on the tension side. When you turn this over clockwise, as you look at it from the front, it's pulling this belt directly to the camshaft. And they typically put tensioners and pulleys and things on the so-called loose side. So I just want to make a mention about that. So I'm going to turn this over to that mark, and I just want to see what lines up. I did notice when I was under the car earlier that there's an access port to look at the flywheel, and typically that is a place that things will line up. So right now, our camshaft timing marks line up. Let's see if we can find anything else that lines up. All right. Ah, there's a mark. So I also want to show you this. Come on, you're going to have to come over here, kind of over the badge, and you're going to have to look down in here. There's a mark right here. Do you see that, you guys? Okay. Now, if you look inside, way back in there, there's a tooth, like a notch between the tooth right there. See that? That's clearly a timing mark. So this upper balance shaft is matching up to a 0. Now, I'm wondering, is there a timing mark around this pulley anywhere? I don't see one. And it doesn't have a, like an ignition timing grade like you see on a small block Chevy or something. Because of the nature of how the ignition is on this, you're not going to change your timing in that same capacity. So what I'm guessing is that the timing mark is probably on the flywheel in the back where you have to access it to make sure this thing lines up. Now, I'm going to say something which is going to make a lot of overly particular people lose their minds when I say it. If the car was running perfectly before, and there's no vibrations, and you're confident that everything is timed well, you can line up this mark, and the other mark down there, and then really nicely paint a mark on the pulley, say like right here, of your, like if you weren't doing the water pump and everything, you could literally paint a mark on this tooth and paint a mark here, and as long as you could make sure this lines up perfectly, or at least see that it hasn't moved, you could replace all this stuff without even looking at the timing mark, assumingly that it's on the back. And I just made a lot of people lose their minds in the Porsche world and mechanics. Just stop. If you actually know what I'm talking about, you know I'm right, because I've done it, and lots of other people have too. And I'm telling you all this because this is not magic. This is a car. It has simple, machine, simple characteristics. And if you know how it actually works, that's when you become a good mechanic and you can do things like this to do things quicker or easier and know the tricks. It doesn't actually require everything to be done perfectly. And my example I'll give you right now is say in World War II, you're a mechanic working on P-51 Mustangs and they're coming in torn up all the time and they got to get out right now and you don't know who's attacking when at what times. Do you really think they did everything perfectly by the book? Okay, Poindexter, well, let's make sure we torque all these bolts exactly right. And you have to do... Heck no, they were rocking through those things. They knew exactly how they worked so they could patch them up, stick them back together, get them right, get them in the sky and fighting. And, which is kind of funny now that I'm saying it, working on a German car. But I'm not going to make that joke right now. So... Yeah, I'm gonna walk away. Next scene. Okay guys, so I get the timing belts lined up and I realized that about the mark, but I wanted to show you just how I've got this laid out nicely. So the tools are here. I'm not doing this to be an obsessive compulsive freak, but I do think you need a clean workspace that's reasonably laid out, whether it's you're in a super nice Formula One paddock garage or you're just in a barn, to make sure things are going really nicely. And you can see how I've laid out things so I know where they go and in a basic order. But come on over here, let's look at the timing belt so you know what's going on exactly. And I could not remember where one timing mark was, and I couldn't find it, so I had to look it up, and I forgot. But come on down here initially, and just take a look. This is the best way to see all the timing belts of the 944. Of course, here is your cam timing belt, and here is your balance shaft timing belt. Now, as a note, I have already removed this idler pulley, which I will show to you, and it is right here. It has an eccentric mounting point, and then you adjust it with a thin wrench, and then tighten it down with a 17 millimeter. It is metal, and you can hear it's, I don't know if you can hear this here. It's not bad, but it doesn't have much lube in it, and it's starting to show signs of age. So in the kit, you actually get new rollers for all that stuff. So that one is flat, and that basically is just barely an idler, okay? So I do not want to talk right now about the tension of the belts. So I'm going to answer that in an upcoming video, so let's just focus on this right now. That's coming. But I removed that because I was looking, I could not find the timing mark for the lower balance shaft. If you guys remember from a moment ago, you can see the notch there in the top of the pulley on the backside and the notch in the plastic. For the cam of the engine and its pulley, there is a notch here from the factory and a notch here. That's how you know that's lined up. And then let's go down here together on the floor. Come on down, I got a light. This is all off and we'll try not to splash, but if you see, this is your tensioning eccentric for the balance shaft timing belt. This is the lower balance shaft pulley. And if you look back there on the back side, there's a notch in the pulley. Can you see that up in there? Toward the back. And there's this little fin right there, okay? That fin points to that notch to be top dead center. So that's the mark there. Now the question is, how do we know the engine is properly at top dead center? Now we're not going to crawl under there to show it, but I did notice when I was looking through, there's a little port on the side to see where the teeth are, and I expected it to be there. But that's because I forgot where it was on a 944. I totally forgot. On a 944, come on over, I think you might be able to see it. There is a rectangular port. I gotta even find it. Where is the darn thing? Yeah, right there where I'm sticking my finger in there. There's a rectangular port and a hole. You able to see it on the camera there, Mr. Camera Guy? Yeah, there it is. It's at the bottom of the screen, you guys. Now he's trying to focus in on that plug. Okay, you guys see it right there? I'm gonna point out with this plug. It's that port right there, way down in there. Now normally, there would be a rubber plug in it to keep debris from going down there, but you can see there's a fin. It's not really in focus. Let's see if I can focus there. Camera's having a difficult time. But that's the hole to know it's in top dead center. And there's a fin, come on out. And we know we've got it. So we know we have everything aligned and in place. There's no battery in. It can't accidentally be bumped. I don't even think it's in gear, but let's make sure it's not. Good, it's in neutral. So now we're at a point where I can go ahead and take the belts off and take this cam housing off. So let's get. Okay guys, come here. I'm gonna take this fuel rail off. So I removed the 10 millimeter bolts and washers that were holding it on here and here. I've already removed the two over here. So now it is mechanically not attached. So we are removing the fuel injector clips. Now it has the little locking metal ring here, or the metal wire going around it. So I gotta be kind of careful. If I just use my Swiss Army knife tool here, it kind of fits in nicely here. And if I just gently pry on one side, it pops loose, and then I kind of pop it here, and it comes off just like this. You don't want to force things because it's really easy to break the plastic. But I want you guys to see that I am just, you know, oh, sure, the last one would be the hardest, right? Come on, you. Come on up there. There we go. Okay, so they've all popped loose nicely, and they're in order, so it's going to be impossible, basically, to not put them in the right order. So I'm going to just gently set them out of the way. And now I'm going to take these loose, these vacuum lines, or just break that right off, because that's totally how that works. So I just broke that right off. It's going to need a new vacuum line. I probably could have stopped from doing that by prying up gently on it just like this. But if it's any consolation, if it breaks off that easily, clearly it needs to be replaced. So we learned it now. So that's all loose. I'm going to attempt to not disconnect these fuel lines, so I think I'm going to be able to just pull this off nicely and flop it over on the side. So that's what I'm going to give it a try. Now I'm not just going to yank it in one spot. I don't want to accidentally break an injector. So I'm just going to pop it loose. Notice I was holding it like this and lifting like this, so when it breaks loose, it just doesn't come flying off, okay? So here's this. Seems I got one spark plug higher in the way. Did that come off of there? Come on, Bushy. Oh, you're being a jerk. Okay. Well, let's try this. I'm not real keen on these spark plug wires, by the way. Okay, so we're gonna set this out of the way. I don't yet have the O-rings and stuff to rebuild that. And obviously we don't want to shut the hood with that like there, or we'll probably squish something and dent the hood. So I want to get this stuff out of the way, clearly, because I'm gonna start working on removing this cam housing once the belts are off. And I want it to be clean with nothing in the way. As a note, you guys will see there's a lot of debris here from over the years of yard debris and stuff. So I'm gonna get a vacuum and vacuum out some of this and blow it away before we start cracking the engine open. And next scene. All right, you guys, obviously it's getting warmer in here and I'm working harder because I've stripped down. But come over here and take a look at this. I'm ready to pull the cam housing off. It's just sitting on that. It uses all of these Allen bolts to hold it on. If you come over here and look, there's a row of these Allen bolts outside, down here in the bottom, way down here underneath. You see these here. And then obviously it makes it so you can get to this piece. I put a piece, paper towel here so it can soak up any of the oil that drips. There's just a little bit. And then up here are aluminum plugs that have an aluminum sealing ring. You have to remove those. And then these bolts that hold the cam housing on are down in there. As a note, the washers that are on them can't fall off. So if you're using a tool and you loosen it and they fall down in there, it's not the end of the world. You can simply use a magnet, fish it down there, grab it, pull it out. So don't be too nervous about it. But I've cleaned off a nice area to put it on. Right now I'm just gonna try to remove it carefully. And when you're removing this, remember that you wanna do it in such a way that the last ones are kind of in the middle because you have the valve springs wanting to push it off. So if you remove them all alone and you get to the end one, it might push off on one side and kind of bind. So keep that in mind when you're doing it. So I try to pull that straight off, and there go the lifters because I'm an idiot and forgot to tip it. God damn it. Okay, so I made a mistake, and right now I need to do some detective work. So come on over here and let's do this detective work together. I made a mistake. Now what I've done is I stopped working. The reason being is it's very important for lifters to go back in where they were because the camshaft sort of creates its own path on them, each lobe. So I want to make sure they go back in the right places. This lifter, this, and this are all still in there, this one and this one. So this one and these two. Damn. I've got two of them right here that presumably are the ones from the middle. That is going to be hard to know. And then the third one came off and fell down. And I think the third one fell off down there. What I'm actually going to do, you guys, I'm putting these off right there. And I'm going to pick up the one from the floor. I'm going to let that drip. I'm not going to freak out about it dripping. That was dumb. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to first grab these lifters. And I'm going to put them over here on the table where we can inspect them carefully, in the order that I found them. So these two were sitting like that in there, and then this one was down on the floor. So I'm going to put it all off on the side. It's our mystery one now. So I'm going to pick this up before it makes a giant mess. Here we are. And we're going to bring it over here. And I'm going to set it like this, how it was oriented. And I'm going to spend a bunch of time using like deductive reasoning and logic and observation to look at the cam lobes and see how they're wearing. Look at these and see if I can see the telltale and how they match on either. And I'm really mad at myself. Oh boy, whatever. Okay, where's my flashlight? Okay, so let's get the light, you guys. This is a good learning experience. And this is where the snobs and the mechanics are going, Casey's an idiot. What a moron. He doesn't remember how it was. Dude. Okay, I want to make a note here. The worst thing about mechanics, race car builders, fabricators, come here a little closer. The worst thing about all these people is that always bash everybody else. It doesn't matter how good of a welder you are. It doesn't matter how many cars you put on the winner's circle of famous racetracks and how many how many cars you built and been successful at. Some idiot out there is going to say you suck at everything you do, every bit of fabrication. You're a crappy painter, you're a crappy welder, you're a crappy everything. You know what? It's all about getting the job done and being reasonable, and everyone makes mistakes along the way. I forgot to think the lifters were going to fall off, partially because I haven't done this in a while, partially because I didn't do any homework, kind of on purpose, because I wanted to show you guys what it was like if you just do it. And partially because I'm a human being, and partially because I was distracted. No excuses, but that's what it is. So now we got to fix it like a real person. And see, look, these are already trying to slide out and make my life more difficult just because they were sitting there like that. So this is a perfectly good example of going, guys, I've worked on a lot of cars. I've done a lot of full services on complicated V12 Ferraris and stuff, and built a lot of cars and turbine-powered Batmobile, and I screwed this up. So this is very doable for a reasonable home mechanic, but you got to have half a brain. So for all you young people out there asking me, is a 944 a good first car? Honestly, you guys, second car, not first. One, because usually when you're a teenager and too spunky, you're going to be all excited because you have a rear-wheel drive Porsche, and you're probably going to pop the clutch and drive too fast and get in trouble and screw it up. Okay? That's one thing. Two, you got to be mechanically sympathetic. This crap is old. And the only people that are going to bail you out is if you make friends with a private mechanic or a buddy that's good with this. Or you can go, you know, get raked over the coals at any dealership or stupid service place that has a lot of money. You know, the ones that are really glamorous. Okay, enough of the dad talking. Let's figure this out. So what I'm going to do, come on in, cameraman. I'm going to look at the camshaft and just kind of look at how it's worn and see if there's any telltale signs that can teach me anything. I'm also going to look at inside to see what it was like for it going up and down, if there's any weird wearing marks or anything. All right, so why don't you just look down in there so you can get an idea. Look straight down there. See the camshaft there, guys? Come on over here. Let's look at the lobes. See the lobes in there and the lobes here. Okay. So we've done that. I want to find something to prop this up on so I can keep it upright. Okay, there we go. So, and also, when I'm done with this, I'm going to clean all this stuff up. I'm going to put assembly lube on it and do it, because when you put the gasket on, it can't be all oily like this. So you guys are going to learn a little bit about assembly lube and whatnot. This is going to be a longer video, it seems. See, when a camshaft is cut, because if a camshaft was perfectly flat and just hit this perfectly flat every time, this wouldn't turn at all. It would just wear a divot. But camshafts are cut in a way that these things will spin when the car is running, and you need them to spin so it wears in the whole area, okay? And that's what I'm looking at right now. Because like if you look at a flat tappet on like a small block Chevy or something, it's really important that they wear in properly. Okay, now this one's got a little bit of funny wear pattern. It's got a little bit of a ring, a shinier ring on it. Nothing bad. Seems like this one's got a little more scratches. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do, guys. My hands are really dirty. I had the camera guy cut it off. I'm gonna clean this stuff up really nice, and so I can see the shininess, and I'm not dirty while I'm looking at it, and we can go from there. That stuff fell out, and I was mad at myself, clearly. What I'm gonna do is, this video has gone on long enough, so we're gonna use this as an opportunity to stop, partially because I don't want it to get too long, and YouTube's algorithm not like it because it's too long. And also, I would like to review the footage and look at a rewind to see which one it is. I think I got it figured out. And honestly, it's probably not going to be the end of the world if I don't do it right. But I did notice there's a fair amount of scoring in that, and that's a telltale sign as to why it's important to change the oil. So I want to show you guys, I've never used this gasket scraper, I just got it. I want to show you guys the old gasket, and maybe we can deduce why it is leaking. It's a very thin gasket, it's very hard, and clearly this is not reusable, even if it's still, and I'm air quoting, intact, because it has no more compliance. It's old as the hills, it's all, is what it is. So, what you can notice if you look at this here, kind of here where it's dark, that's the oil passageway. Fascinating. Goes in there. But literally, if it just leaks in one tiny little area, or kind of cracks, that's all it takes to make this leak. It does not take very much for a gasket to go bad. So there's the old one. And of course, here is the new one. So you can see the difference between the two. Old, new, obviously. So I want to be very careful as you inspect it, make sure it never got folded. If this gets folded, it's already ruined. If it has a tiny little crack in it, it's ruined. So keep that in mind when you're going to go put this back together. Let's take one last look at the top surface of the engine. Now the nice thing about the 944 with this seal here is it comes off very cleanly and easily. As a note, do not clean a surface like this with a whiz wheel or a die grinder, okay? Even though they make those things to remove gaskets, you're still gonna be putting little cuts and edges into this nice machined aluminum surface and everything there, especially if you're doing like Ferraris and valve cover gaskets. It depends on the metal. If you got an old iron Chevy with a super thick gasket and you're putting RTV on it anyway, then sure, go ahead and whiz wheel the crap out of it if you want. But on a European car like this, where it's gotta be tight tolerances and it's got really thin, hard gaskets, you gotta be very careful. And I honestly, this scraper, I wouldn't even use this. I would take out a brand new razor blade with my fingertips and very gently scrape it so that I don't hurt the aluminum, only to take off the gasket material. My other tip for you is, if you can see here on the edge, it builds up a bunch of gunk on the edge. So when you're wiping it, wipe it in a direction that makes the gunk go away from the inside of the motor. See how I'm wiping this downward and away? I don't want any gunk going into the motor. Now, and sure, I mean, if a microscopic amount goes in there, it's gonna wash itself down to the pan and get sucked up by the pump and go in the filter pretty quickly. But it's still crap in your motor. It's still gonna hurt your impeller blades on your pump and everything like that. So we're gonna come back to it. We're gonna clean it up. We're gonna get that water pump up and make it happen really well. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this very real day working on a 944 and that it's inspired you to enjoy sports cars out there, because you can. You don't need a ton of money, you just need a brain and some good risk assessment and some tools. And there are plenty of cool cars, whether it's a 944 or a C4 Corvette or a 928, Camaro, whatever, you can have a heck of a lot of fun with for little money. And this is a great learning experience too. So I hope you guys will share, of course, and that you will like and comment and naturally subscribe. See you guys next time.